This is Popping the Bubble with hosts Sandra Ponce de Leon and Pete A. Turner.
Hey there, my name is Ben Metcalfe. I am a venture capitalist and serial entrepreneur here in San Francisco. Super excited to be here today, and you are listening to Popping the Bubble.
Very good. Awesome introduction. Thank you so much for joining us, Ben.
I took like the third take there, or the second take.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
As long as you got it right in the end, right?
That's right.
That's the entrepreneurial journey.
Isn't it kind of British to fail in advance? Isn't that what you guys do?
That's right. We have a whole history of failure, except that, we have an empire, and I guess that ultimately failed as well. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we don't want to talk about the empire.
Yeah, we don't want to go there.
No.
But before we dive into it, just want to say, we're recording here at the Vault, which is a beautiful collaborative workspace and innovation hub here in the heart of Silicon Valley in San Francisco. The Vault celebrates entrepreneurs and innovators from around the world and provides them with the right tools and support to grow better and faster. So thank you so much, The Vault, for having us. It's been a great day so far, and thank you, Ben, for joining us.
Great. Thank you to be here. And this is great facilities, so absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, I find your journey as an entrepreneur and now as a VC fascinating. I mean, you've had some major successes, and you're still, a young buck.
I don't feel that young anymore, but thank you.
There's like maybe one or two gray hairs, but barely. I don't see any wrinkles. I mean, we want to talk a little bit about how you got to this place, to being a VC.
Sure. You want me just to dive straight into it?
Maybe not like when you were born.
I was born, and then I sort of took my first breath.
We do detect an accent, so that might be interesting to hear how you came, across the pond.
Yeah,
right.
Well, I came across the pond on a plane. It was great.
Really?
There was like two wings, and it kind of landed.
Modern technology.
That's right. No, I'm originally from the United Kingdom. I was born in London. I do my best to keep my accent, and the more I'm now aware of it, my accent's going to get even more British now I'm thinking about it.
Do you add in California stuff, though? So are you like Calish?
For real.
Do you say hella?
Hella. You know what was great? So we can come on to one of my businesses, but we founded the business in Texas, in Austin. And the great thing about being in Austin, if you live in Austin or you're from Austin, then you can say y'all. Mm-hmm. Y'all is a great word, but you can't say it unless you're in Texas or you are Texan.
That's true.
And at this point in time, I am neither, so I'm banned now from using it.
But you can't say hella.
I can't say hella.
Anytime you want.
And you can, I don't know if you know this, this is specifically Northern California thing that you wouldn't necessarily know. You can stack hellas. So like,
really?
Oh, it's hella hot in here. And then if it's even worse than that, you can triple hella.
Really? It sounds like hella cubed.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Right, but it's way better to say it like it's hella, because you got to draw the last one out. Windy here,
right.
So it's usually weather related.
I have learned something after my 11 and a half years of living in the great state of California.
The double and triple. But you don't pull the triple out too often. You have to respect how hard it is,
I have lived my life with the motto of never pulling out the triple.
Right.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, you certainly pulled out the triple to get here.
That's right.
Or not.
Or not. Yep. Moving swiftly on.
Tell us, you took a plane.
I took a plane
11 years ago. And what happened?
Yeah, so, I can go even further back in my career, but I was at the BBC, which I'm sure many people have heard of, the British broadcaster that actually was an internet pioneer in the late 90s. I joined the BBC in 2000 to work on the BBC News website as a software engineer and then product manager. And, those were amazing times. We had 9/11, which was, of course, a terrible tragedy, but just being in a newsroom in that era was fascinating. And I think it was a golden era of online news compared to fake news and everything else we have these days. And then I set up the BBC's developer platform and APIs, and that brought me to San Francisco a lot. In California, just to market it, just to get to know people. It's very much a community thing. And in coming to visit, I was like, actually, this would be a kind of a cool place to be for my next part of my career. And weird things in the UK, the BBC was moving a lot of people from London to Manchester. And they were like, maybe, you're going to be moving to Manchester as one of the first people. And I was like, I don't want to move to Manchester. So I said to myself, why don't I move to San Francisco instead? And it was 2006. I was 25,
Wow.
and I kind of like turned up, frankly, with like less than $10,000 in my bank account and 2 suitcases, and was like, I got to make this happen.
But still with the BBC.
No,
Oh, you
no,
just said
I
no,
just
no
said,
chance for this SF. It's SF or bust.
yep. I did 6 years at the BBC. That was long enough, and I turned up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Who's the first person that you met?
One of the first people that I met on one of my trips that really had a great early influence on me was Tantek Celik, who is a open source ambassador at the Mozilla Foundation, so Firefox. Tantek really encouraged me to meet a lot of the people out here. This was kind of pre what we call Web 2.0, for those of you who remember the Web 2.0 days. But this was really like the Barcamp era and the era of really thinking about community.
Yeah.
Like this is stuff we take into consideration now. Yeah, like earlier, 2005, 2006, sitting here in San Francisco in South Park. For those of you that know that, it's like a beautiful little park.
It's a secret.
It's a secret. I don't know so much of a secret anymore. I think everyone could. But people would just get a sandwich or a coffee and sit out, and we would talk about, micro formats and OAuth. So if you ever log into a website with, your Twitter credentials or Facebook credentials, well, that's not quite OAuth, but basically those are all the open formats. We were doing all this format, and this was what was going on, and it was fun times, and you really felt that you could take on the man, as it were, just being in the open source community and doing things. And I've always been an open source fan, and we can probably talk a bit about that because it relates to my business, but I just met this amazing cadre of people.
Yeah.
And was like, I need to move out here, and so I did.
Nice.
Which was great.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you moved out here. What was your next move?
I set up a business early on with Chris Messina, who just recently founded a company that's a YC company called Molly.com. And his partner at the time, Tara Hunt, called Citizen Agency. And the thesis of that was we really wanted to help companies understand how community could really help them. Again, this is nothing new today, but in 2006, we had, the Clue Train Manifesto, if you're familiar with that book, which was really important to me. My interest was developers and developer platforms and getting developers as a community to help extend your product or your company. Another opportunity for biz dev. Tara really looked at marketing. Chris looked at product. And as part of that, we also created Citizen Space, which was on 2nd Street.
I remember that. I've been there.
That was one of the first, if not the first, co-working spaces in San Francisco. So I remember painting the walls and putting the IKEA furniture together for that. It's not there anymore, unfortunately. I think, I think it sort of broke the ground for a lot of amazing co-working spaces, including the one we're in today.
Yeah, this is a collaborative workspace.
A collaborative working space. But even still, all of these are sort of turns on the same theme, I think, that other people were not really doing back then.
Right.
And so it was exciting. But unfortunately, things didn't work out, and we all went our separate ways. And then ultimately, I did a few things, and I became the director of platform at MySpace in Beverly Hills.
Wow.
Which, if you've ever been to Beverly Hills, you'll know that's not really a place you'd expect to have a lot of geeks and software engineers hanging around doing tech.
No. This is a pre-Silicon Beach days. Yes.
Well, this was they actually moved from Santa Monica from a small little, when they were an independent company, to when Fox Interactive Media, Rupert Murdoch, bought them. And I could see that, my background, as I said, was developer platforms. I could see that Facebook was coming out with that. I knew the founders and executives at MySpace, and I said, hey, you really need to think about doing something here. And after some mumming and ahhing, they're like, okay, come on board. What do you want to do? Let's do this. So by that time, I could see it was 2007. So MySpace was still bigger than Facebook at that point.
Yeah, right.
But it was on the decline. So I did it for a year. Brought in some open standards, did things like data portability, which has been discussed a lot very recently, I think, with the Mark Zuckerberg hearing some of the stuff that's changing in Europe over laws, and brought in a lot of OpenID as well, if you remember OpenID as a concept, into an environment that really was very alien to a lot of open source of MySpace back in the days. So that was interesting.
Yeah, it must have been hard coming with your background, being such a believer in open source.
It was a meeting of different views, but I also think that we also engaged with Google and did OpenSocial. At the end of the day, most of these things were not successful. I think partly also because MySpace was on the decline, but it helped socialize a lot more of these ideas that everything have to be closed. You didn't have to be, I think MySpace was really like Russia. It was like this big thing at the time that nobody really understood how it worked. It was down in LA.
Right.
It was kind of being weird with people's developers and taking people off the page at different times. And it was really interesting just to get people a little bit more aware of open source. And yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. Yeah, and so from there, where did you do? What did you do next?
After that, I did a bunch of startups that kind of didn't work.
Okay.
And we can talk about those, I guess, because those are interesting.
Sure.
Or maybe not. I think, we were talking before, I think you learn a lot from your mistakes.
Yes.
So one of them we did was called Platos Forms, which we then renamed to Newsbasis, which was probably a better name. And Platos Forms, there were many forms on the cave that Plato, it was not going into the academic, it was too kind of academic, but it was really my background with publishing and news and trying to create mechanisms for PR and corporate communication people to better interact with journalists behind the scenes.
Interesting.
So it was a tool to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I co-founded that with a guy called Daryl Siri, who at the time was the director of sales at a small startup called Tesla. And this was very pre-IPO, and he decided to leave Tesla because I think he thought it was about to fail. And we did this business instead. So I always think of Daryl because if I'm brutally honest, he probably should have stayed at Tesla pre-IPO. Given where that's now gone, I know there's some, concerns about Tesla at the moment still, but obviously they've had an amazing ride.
They said that to him?
I haven't spoken to Daryl for many years, and I wouldn't say I'm, he now lives on the East Coast and has a family, so he's not around. But I think what I learned was I don't think him and I were the right co-founders for the business. I also don't think we raised enough money to be successful, and I also think that we didn't get very good product market fit. And these are all things that I would definitely advise founders to think very carefully about.
Right. Now
and get right.
Now as a VC, this is some criteria you probably
Absolutely
bring into your selection
Absolutely.
process. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you've got to look at founders. I think at the end of the day, the team that I'm investing in is probably perhaps in early stage investment where I invest the most important factor, perhaps, because if it's a really amazing idea and a really amazing market opportunity, but the team is crap, they're not going to be able to do anything. If you've got a really amazing team who've done some great things in the past, very smart, and maybe their idea isn't as good as it could be, or the market doesn't look as good, that could still change. You could still pivot. You could still, evolve the idea. You can't evolve a team. A team is a team. You can bring more people on, but they're not going to be founders.
Right.
And so really, you have to look at the team. The team's really important. Product market fit is really important, of course. If you're investing in a Series A, which is where I'm often investing, I kind of want to see that you have traction. And, if you want to raise $3 or $4 million or more, then at that point, you kind of got to show me that things have been successful.
Is that typically what you invest in, 3 to 4 million? Or?
We do. So I'm a VC at Ridge Ventures. We are a B2B and enterprise software investor in VC, and we do Series A, what we call smaller Series A. So Andreessen Horowitz and other people will do these jumbo 20 million Series A's, and that's great, and good luck to them. And they offer all these other services and other things, and that's great. What we typically do is Series A's between, say, $3 and $10 million, which I think is still a very good Series A. But it's interesting because also seed is now getting into that. I mean, people will raise a $4 million seed round.
Right.
So then that becomes the same check size that we would write for Series A.
Right. Yeah, and the other factor that's impacting the market now is also the whole blockchain phenomenon and the initial coin offerings.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, how is that impacting your investment style?
Well, it's interesting. So Gil Penchina is one of the partners in my firm, and he's very engaged, as people in the blockchain space will know. I think the reality right now is it hasn't. And I got a couple of different thoughts on that. I mean, for a start, most VC firms won't participate in the ICOs themselves. There's a lot of views around needing to register as a hedge fund, and it's a different type of security. And so what we're set up for from a regulatory perspective as VCs doesn't allow us to invest in ICOs themselves. And I think if you then... and I have a lot of views on ICOs in general. We can get into that as well. But
could you buy the coins as a means
no,
to investing?
that's the point.
But you couldn't even take a securitized stance on it.
No, because it's a different type of security. So then you have to register as a hedge fund because you're buying a currency or whatever the SEC's most recent views are on this, and of course that's all very up in the air.
Right.
And the other issue is, LPs who put money into VC firms, what they're doing is they're taking their stack of money that they want to invest and they're putting it in different places, different types of areas of investment, different what we call asset classes.
Right.
That's a different asset class. So if they're interested in doing that, they might be putting their money into a different type of fund or hedge fund that wants to actually invest in ICOs. So therefore, we're kind of stepping outside of our lane to be investing in ICOs on their behalf.
Got it. So primary investment thesis is B2B, SaaS, enterprise companies.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily just SaaS, but I think SaaS is really interesting because when you've got a recurring revenue model, which most SaaS businesses have, it's really easy relatively easy to identify a healthy business from the numbers by the time a company is raising Series A. We have a lot of experience of that. I've operated as a SaaS-based business. So in terms of being able to provide value, which as a VC I always want to be able to do, I'm able to help a SaaS-based business or platform as a service or any kind of business with that kind of model, more than anything. And I think the era of on-premise.
What about BaaS?
Badass.
We learned about bees as a service.
Bees as a service.
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
Everything as a service.
So bees is fascinating, and this is why I love my job as a VC. I get all these pitches. We don't do a whole lot of hardware, but I was pitched a IoT device for beehives.
Huh.
So honeybees are massively on the decline.
Yes, we know this.
And not only do they provide delicious honey, but they also pollinate the vineyards.
Right.
Sure.
Up here
Delicious grapes.
Yes, and so you will, if you own a vineyard, you will pull hives out, come to your vineyard to then pollinate your vineyards.
Yep.
So bees are very valuable, and of course, whenever there's value, there's people wanting to invest in things. And so someone developed a device that sits inside the hive and can tell you when it thinks, if it detects any of the conditions that could mean that the bees are about to die, or the bees are about to have a bad experience, or I don't know, all sorts of things. And so we don't do hardware, so it wasn't something for us.
Yeah.
But it's an example of where I'm really lucky to have my job and do what I do because I have this intellectual curiosity about everything, and suddenly I'm diving into the world of like, well, how do you detect the conditions, temperature, moisture, even down to like vibrations, and work out what's going to require a healthy environment for bees, what looks like the bees are going to...
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And then how do you communicate between different hives? How do you get that information to somewhere to then monitor that? How do you then raise the alarm? What do you then do about it? Fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Yeah, we
love bees.
We had a company on here from IndieBio called BeeFlow,
Mm-hmm.
and they sort of looked at it and said, hey, the beekeeping science has never really gotten from the academic to the practical.
Sure.
And so they just put themselves right in the middle of that, and they make smarter, like the bees have memory. I never knew that.
Right.
And so they're like, hey, listen, instead of these other flowers, we want you to focus on these blueberries or grapes or whatever it's going to be. And taking that, so increasing yield because they're focused in the right area and everything, keeping them healthier and all these other things. It's incredible.
It is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, bees as a service. Software as a service, bees as a service, platform as a service. What else? Is there anything else as a
IaaS,
service? What's the most surprising?
Infrastructure as a service.
Infrastructure.
These are not sexy and interesting businesses necessarily in some people's minds, but they still are businesses that have a huge impact.
Yes.
And are interesting from an investment perspective. And, I've come from the world of Uber and, cars as a service or cars on demand and everything else, and that's really interesting as well. But I still find the B2B space super interesting and engaging. I think the consumer stuff, HQ and the quizzes and all this kind of stuff, I don't really get a lot of that, and so I don't deny that some of this stuff is successful, but I would have a harder job selecting what was good or not. I think it's ultimately about investing in things that you're passionate and interested in.
Yeah. But so what made you do the shift from, because you were in a consumer business, what made you do the shift to B2B?
Oh, because I went from Uber to being so I went from co-founding WP Engine, which is a software as a service / platform as a service for WordPress.
Right.
And we've done really well with that. We just raised about $260 million. We did $100 million in revenue last year.
Wow.
But I left that after my 4 years and went to work for Uber. I'd known Travis for a while. Travis wanted me to come and set up some interesting things at Uber, which I did in public policy with tech, which was a passion of mine that I wanted to sort of run down. I think I ultimately joined a VC firm that I could really use the basis of my experience in WP Engine, which I think is probably where my greatest experience and value has come from. I helped Uber with a lot of technology around public policy, which is very interesting, but I don't think it has a huge impact for investment. I mean, it's definitely going to be a lot more regulated environments. Looks like Facebook is going to become a regulated environment. I think a lot, WP Engine wasn't a regulated environment. I mean, we've generally benefited in software from not being regulated. So it's probably going to be that this is going to be more apparent across the board. But, I think there was a bit of an oversaturation of Uber for X, Uber for laundry. Laundry and dry cleaning is not a huge margin business. So now you're going to be the Uber for laundry. That's not suddenly a huge margins. It's not, I mean, those businesses are not that interesting. I'm not going to name them, but I don't think they're that interesting.
Definitely.
And I think a lot of, people were doing fuel on demand, drive a fuel truck to your house and fill up. I can just go to the gas station. There was cash. Someone did this where they had if you wanted $100, someone could come and deliver you $100. Can you imagine any problems that might have occurred with that? I can go to any ATM in the city and get money out. These are not hard, valuable problems to solve.
No.
And I think that investing in those, I'm sure there's going to be one or two interesting companies, but it's not as clear cut and didn't interest me.
No. What is? Can you talk about some of the companies that you have invested in that you're finding interesting or fascinating right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're really interested in AI, and I think everyone sort of says, "Oh, AI, everything's got AI," and it's like, well, your domain is something.ai doesn't mean that you're an AI company.
Right.
And I think that AI has become a very overused term, and a lot of people use say, "Oh, well, my product has AI in it," and actually it doesn't. But there are a lot of companies where, software as a service was all about taking installed software or on-premise software and running it in the cloud. So Salesforce was an early example of that. And I think it's fair to say that in every software class, there's probably now very strong SaaS players. You could pick them out.
Yeah.
So from an investment perspective, you say, well, what's next?
Right.
Because what's going to disrupt those guys?
Yeah.
If it's going to be cheaper, let's do Salesforce, but cheaper. It's kind of not that interesting. So AI is one example of where there's actually a lot of interesting things you can do and say the incumbent can't continue to innovate because they have innovators' dilemma. They just need to continue to service their existing customer. But can you bring in some form of AI, true AI? And what I mean by that are, using machine learning, using models that will actually take the data that you have and learn something from them to then predict something else or provide some degree of insight, because you need data in order to form a model. And if you already have data, if you're already running a software as a service business, or you are getting clients from an existing business that you're pulling clients out of, you can do interesting things which then disrupt the incumbent. So that looks very interesting. So an example of a company that we invested in would be Outlier.ai.
Outlier.ai.
Yeah, really interesting company. So the founder of Flurry, Sean Burns, and one of the early data scientists at Aardvark, which Google acquired and became the OK Google personalization stuff that everyone knows and loves. That, look, my phone's just lit up as I said the keyword
so
there.
Funny.
They take all of your business data, all of your databases, everything, and just compare everything to everything else.
Yeah.
And look for outliers, for correlations. And then they email you
across multiple companies.
Across all of your business data.
Oh, just one company.
But within your business data.
Yes.
So your Google Analytics, your Stripe, your CRM, your Mixpanel, every proprietary database you have. And they'll say, hey, looks like your the revenue on your website was flat for the last 30 days, but the inventory in your warehouse has gone down. You might want to look into that. Or over the last 24 hours, the number of logins from the Android client has rapidly decreased, but the iOS logins have stayed the same. Maybe you pushed out a bad Android build that's broken.
Wow.
You did a marketing campaign aimed at various different markets and geographies, and for some reason the markets in the northeast of America have massively outperformed everything else. You might want to look into that. And so there's lots of examples of where this sort of complements dashboards. So you build out these BI dashboards, and you have to know what you're looking for: sales, engagement of your website, logins, whatever. But this tells you the things you didn't know to look out for, and say, hey, this is the past 30 days of this of these two data points. Something's happened here, and we're pushing it to you, and now you can track that in your BI, or you can go away and find out why that was. So it's really interesting, really exciting stuff. And that's true AI. That's using that existing data, both within your company and within all the companies that they see, to then understand where those outliers and exceptions occur.
Yeah, fascinating. And what's their target market? Are they just sort of mid-level enterprise and above?
Yeah, it's probably not small business, but definitely medium-sized businesses and above. And I definitely think the value of the insights that they provide are very useful across the board, but even up to enterprise companies for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. I guess, I'd love to hear, as you've made this transition from entrepreneur, and we touched briefly on WP Engine, which was a great success, and then you went to Uber. How has that transition been for you? They're very different personality types, archetypes. How's that been?
Certainly between WP Engine and Uber. At WP Engine, we have an amazing culture. We founded the business and really wanted to make sure that it was a great place to work. Even though, in Texas you don't need to have same-sex benefits, we wanted to make sure that we provided same-sex benefits. We had an LGBTQ plus policy of inclusion, really wanted to hire diversity. We hired a lot of vets. When Jason Cohen and myself didn't want to run the business anymore, at the very top we hired an amazing female CEO, amazing female CFO, and when I left the company, the executive board was a 50-50 gender split. Great values around building a sustainable business, committed to giving back. We're based on open source product of WordPress, and so looking at how you give back to communities, both the WordPress community and other communities. That was really important to me, and that was a process which, to be honest with you, I hadn't really done before, and I was thinking was a little mumbo jumbo American kind of whatever, but as soon as we did it, I realized it was a really useful thing to do.
Yeah, so being intentional with the culture.
Yeah, I then landed at Uber, and Uber is a fantastic and amazing company. It's an exceptional company, and it will be a landmark company that we will talk about for hundreds of years. But, in Travis's race to be as successful and as fast growing as we were and still are, culture was not at the top of the list. There weren't cultural values when I joined. I think it was about employee number 5,000 when they released cultural values, which is far too late because at that point the culture is already there.
Yeah.
And there's obviously been a lot of things that have been written about Uber, and we've all read the stories. For what it's worth, I didn't see any of the kind of behaviors that have been written about. Uber was a 4,000 person company when I left, so obviously in many different countries, so obviously things could be occurring in other places. I certainly didn't see that. I hired an amazing female engineering manager for my team. I think that people felt that there was a respect for women within the environment and the team that I was in, but I can't obviously comment and don't have the knowledge of other parts of the business. But it was definitely clear that it was an aggressive environment. I think it had to be to some extent because it's a very competitive land grab environment where Uber needed to get ahead in China, Uber needed to get ahead in the Southeast Asia, Uber needed to get ahead in America against Lyft, and that aggression, Uber wouldn't be where it is today, but that also comes at a price, which is a mentality and hiring people who want to be in that environment that then, without a lot of oversight from a culture perspective, I think ended up with the
it
problems
puts
you have.
Uber in the position that they are in today.
Absolutely.
Well, it's not on my phone,
or at least were. I think that Dara has done a lot of good things there.
Yeah.
One of the things my team did, we launched the Uber's Deaf Driving program to enable people to who are deaf and hard of hearing to drive on the platform.
Wow.
That was really meaningful to me that we were able
absolutely.
to do that, and Uber's continue to do that. Uber's work on that front is up for a Webby Award, I've noticed. Uber's doing a lot more social good projects that we were desperately trying to do within my team. So, I think things have changed, and I think things are on the up for Uber. I totally understand and respect, like you said, not everyone wants to use Uber anymore, and I think Uber has a long way to go to re-earn people's trust, but I think that it'll get there.
Yeah, do you think that that working in that environment prepped you well for becoming a VC?
I don't think so in that sense. I think, I was very careful with the VCs that I selected. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of discussion of bad behavior by VCs in the media as well, and I am very confident that is not the type of thing that's going on at Ridge Ventures, at the VC firm that I work for. And I was very careful to select a VC firm that I really felt I had a synergy with, and I could trust the partners and the firm overall. I think we have a very good culture at Ridge. We're a small firm. I mean, there's 4 partners and a total of about 8 or 9, 10 employees. So I don't think it prepared me necessarily for the VC world. I think what it opened my eyes to more was that in companies that I invest in and we invest in, we need to make sure that, yes, the company's got great team, it's got great business market that it's in, it's got a great product, great traction, but you also need to make sure that the culture's right. And where everyone, the founders all the way down, are coming from, and is everything aligned, and are people going to build a business that's like WP Engine, or are they going to build a business like Uber in terms of culture? And being able to help and coach founders with that kind of thing is one of the pleasures of my job.
Yeah.
What do you coach them to do? I mean, it's one thing to have the theory, but to practice, and there's often that gap in there.
I think someone once said to me, and I've forgotten who it was, so I can't...
I'm taking credit for it.
Attribute. Yeah, maybe it was you. Yeah. They said to me, after you find product market fit, your role as a founder is to hire great people and to fire people if they're not doing well. And that's kind of it. I mean, that's an oversimplification. There's a lot of other things as a founder to do.
For sure.
But if you want to hire great people, you need to have a culture.
Yeah.
You often need to be mission driven and have a reason for people. Like if you want to hire a software engineer in the Bay Area, or you want to hire a data scientist, everyone wants to hire those people.
Sure.
You can pay them $150,000, you can pay them $200,000, you can give them X percentage of your business. So can the next company, so can the next company. So what is it that's going to differentiate your business and not only get those people to sign on the line to come and join your company, but actually want to come and really be part of it and feel part of it? And having an amazing culture is often what is going to be the selling point and the decider from your company from another company.
But that's kind of hard to tell as an employee coming in. How do you know? I mean, there's been times when I've joined companies and I thought that it would be a good fit, but it in the end it wasn't. How do you ensure that comes through?
Well, I think people as employees are asking these questions more than ever. I actually just came from a coffee a couple of hours ago for an associate candidate at the firm that I work at, which we've made an offer to her, and she really wanted to sit down. So she's had the offer, we've made the offer, she's considering it. She really wanted to talk about diversity. She really wanted to talk about culture, and I was happy, of course, and delighted for the opportunity to do so. But people are asking, and I think also as founders, if people are not asking the questions, then is that a red flag or at least a yellow flag that the employee isn't thinking about that? Because are they going to be mindful of culture when they arrive? Because it's one thing to check out the culture before you arrive at a company. Once you're part of the company, you need to be an ambassador for that culture. You need to be mindful of it. If you're not thinking about that, are you going to be the type of person that's going to shoot his mouth and make the female identifying employees in that company feel uncomfortable? Are you going to be totally unaware of the unconscious bias that you might be otherwise displaying? I think it's important to see that actually, and for I always say to people, interviews are two-way.
Right.
The employee is interviewing you to see where they actually want to go and work there, and if they're not asking those questions, you can help them. And hey, by the way, let's talk about culture here. Let's talk about some things you might want to think about. If you ask them and they don't ask, those questions aren't forthcoming. But ultimately, if they're not really resonating and thinking about any of these issues at all, then that might be a red flag, or at least a yellow flag. Certainly in this day and age.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would do differently in your entrepreneurial journey?
I think I would take leaps earlier and not want to have a safety net as much as I always wanted. I think I missed out on opportunities because I always was thinking about what might happen if I leap and fail. And ultimately, failure is not always as bad as it might seem. So what do I mean by that? I won't completely get involved until I know that I have consultancy work lined up so that I can still make some consultancy money in case this doesn't work out. Right, but then I'm not completely all in on this startup, and my involvement being all in might be the make or break to me being successful at this. Another one would be, if I don't do this, I might not be able to. If I jump into this company, or if I take this opportunity and it doesn't work out, I'm only going to have 2 months worth of rent left. So what am I going to do? Well, so what if you get 2 months of rent? You can probably find some other work elsewhere. Maybe you have to move out and find a cheaper place. So what? Like the upsides, both the economic upsides, the career upsides, the fun and interesting, engaging work that you could have been doing, are being curtailed because of that cautiousness, which I think also comes as being a Brit and a European. I think we kind of have a bit more of a cautious mentality. I also don't come from a trust fund or a family with money, so it's not like mummy and daddy are going to give me a load of money to help or anything like that. But being able to just kind of jump and trust the universe is something that I would tell my younger self to do a lot more of, and also just not tie myself up with as much. I've been very careful not to tie myself up with liabilities like an expensive mortgage or expensive car payments, or things that I've seen people not be able to take opportunity because they were got to pay for my $800 a month Porsche that I've decided to lease. Well, you know what? Now that Porsche is stopping you from joining a great startup that's not going to pay you enough to pay that car payment. But so what? You're now driving around in a Porsche.
What is the 20 year from now you tell you now then that you're not doing that you should have done?
Well, if I knew, I wouldn't be doing it. I don't know. I don't know. I'm very lucky that I just bought a house, and I wonder whether the 20-year me will decide. Thank you. Whether they're going to say that that was a good idea or a bad idea. Because I'm kind of taking my own advice here and doing the other way. I'm now locking myself down with.
Yep.
Well, I bought a house, but I also want and need to live in San Francisco. And for those of us that live here and live in the Bay Area, rents still seem to keep going up. Everyone's leaving, right? But the rents aren't going down because people are still living, and people I know are still sharing rooms.
Well,
and
they're
going to
build buildings taller. That'll bring rent. No,
people
no,
are still
it still
coming
goes up.
in.
Yeah. Isn't there a famous expression that talking about a place, people say, "Oh, nobody goes there anymore because it's too busy."
Yeah.
It's a bit like that. I think that I think another thing, just on a practical level, is if I moved here 11 years ago, I wish I'd jumped on a rent control apartment 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Which I didn't do.
Would that be your other pied-à-terre now?
No, I think no. I'm a big fan of rent control. I think if I had a rent control place, I would give that up for someone else to benefit from. Yeah, rent control is a controversial thing, particularly for a VC to be thinking about. But we need to enable people to be able to live in the Bay Area and San Francisco in particular.
Really impossible.
And even if you make 6 figures a year, and it's still difficult. Yep. And so it's just kind of nuts. And it's a real shame that Scott Wiener's, State Senator Wiener's bill recently to, as you said, increase density along transit lines across the state was rejected in the first hearing. We in California are not feeling that it is important to let people be able to live near where they actually want to work and be able to live in the cities that potentially they grew up in.
Yeah, multi-hour commutes in one direction are not at all uncommon. Yeah, that's for sure. Patterson is now part of the Bay Area, and that's nowhere near.
I have no idea where that even is.
Exactly. It's near Tracy. Where the fuck is Tracy? It's way out there. I was going to ask you, in terms of a VC, you're plugged in. You're constantly chewing through like, what is this? Oh, bees. Now let me get started on bees. You're always doing that. But what do you unplug from all that with? Like, what diverts your attention well enough to keep you from? It sounds like you're not like me. Like, I have to know a lot more about this, and then you fill up your well.
I'm a big fan of yoga, and I think a lot of people. If you follow and track this space a lot, everyone's into now this sort of wellness and yoga and meditation and whatever. And, I'm not a Buddhist. I grew up in a Buddhist family. My parents are Buddhists, and been doing yoga since before I was born. So my parents are very yogi. I left Uber and spent a lot of time really thinking about what I wanted to do next, and had a lot of stuff, a lot of things on my mind. And the yoga really helped. Picking up yoga really helped do 2 things. It cleared my mind, and there's reasons for that. I mean, I said I'm not spiritual, but there's reasons from a scientific perspective why yoga is very good for clearing your mind. And it also made me fit, which was great. The bad side of working somewhere like Uber is you get as much free candy and food and snacks, and Yeah, so it was good just to be able to feel fitter again, and not even from a weight, just from all the sugar and crap that I've been eating. So I do yoga, I do a little bit of meditation. I don't meditate that often, but I do find that useful. I definitely sit there sometimes with my phone in my hand and just see myself going, you sat here and you've opened your mail client, then you've opened up Facebook,
Yeah.
then you've gone to websites, then you've gone back to Facebook, then you've gone back to the Messenger client, then you've gone back to Facebook, then you've gone back to your email. What are you doing here, Ben?
Yeah.
And this is what on a chemical level is going on in your brain with the dopamine of all of this, and is that really what I want to be doing with my brain? Because you only have so much energy in the day, and all of this is costing you.
Yeah.
It's a bit like those strategy games, if you ever played them as a kid, where you had energy and different things that you had to manage as you went around the battlefield or whatever. And during the day, your energy is being depleted by these things, and if that's not moving you forward, it's like the strategy game of your day. Then you're not being productive. And I find that even today, I find that I'm sometimes caught off guard and realizing that I'm fatigued halfway through the day, and it's just because of all of the stuff that's coming into me and all of different notifications and everything. And so just unplugging and even meditating for 10 minutes is really amazing.
Yeah, I think we all need to do that more because we are all in the same cycle.
Oh, yeah.
Same dopamine cycle.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a Buddhist monk called Matthew Rickards who I had the pleasure and honor of meeting a few years ago. And he's reasonably senior below the Dalai, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he's also a PhD in neuroscience, as well as being a Buddhist monk. He's French. He lives in Nepal.
Wow.
And he talked a lot about, even if you don't believe in the spirituality of meditation, the impact it has on the brain and the brain chemistry. So it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And I think that even if you don't want to do it for spiritual reasons, everyone's trying to get a leg up. Everyone's trying to think about how they can get ahead in tech and in their industry and in their business and in their careers. And this is a legitimate way of actually clearing your mind and then being able to do more. I mean, I think there's more to it than that. But if that's actually just a way of entry into it, I see a lot of people looking at this stuff just to kind of help kind of get ahead or get sort of the next advantage. I don't know whether I entirely think that's a great thing to do, but I see that as a strategy.
Yeah. So it's counterintuitive. Slow down to get ahead.
Yep. Well, everything. I mean, there's definitely been this wellness, mindfulness bent in tech in the Bay Area, and as I said, coming from a Buddhist family, because a lot of it is not necessarily following Buddhism, but it's following yoga, meditation, a lot of practices that are synonymous with this. But then these people are not interested in any of that. You ask them, you say, well, why are you doing this? And it's like, because I want to get ahead. And I think it's going to make me more performant than the next VC, or more performant than the next software engineer, or more performant than the next founder. And I think that's kind of sad. I think that's fine if that's your way into things. I think that's not necessarily a great goal. But I do think that it speaks to the fact that there is something here that, it doesn't cost anything to try it out. Download the apps. They're free.
Right.
I don't think meditating with an app is the best thing to do, but it's a good way of getting on with it and having a go and having a try. And if it works, then...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do like it. Well, I actually, on that note, I think we have another 10-minute gap for our next guest. But thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
Coming to
fascinating.
meet us here at the Vault and telling us about your journey, which is fascinating. And I learned a few more things about you that I didn't know.
There you go. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Anytime. Come back.
If someone is looking to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
You can visit my website, Ben Metcalfe, which is BenMetcalfe.com, and I have some stuff there, and you can contact me there and all that good stuff. Otherwise, I'm .ben, DOTBEN, on Twitter.
All right, awesome. All right, thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you.